One advantage of a reverse inflation is that it puts you in a position to observe the canopy directly as it comes up, and to quickly respond as appropriate. In higher winds, you have the additional advantage of being in a better position to brace yourself against the pull at the canopy, or to run towards it, if necessary, to moderate its pull against you. If conditions are smooth and there is no possibility of being pulled unexpectedly into the air by a gust or sudden thermal, you can kite the canopy while reversed and inspect it easily at your leisure. It is normally easier to abort a reverse launch than a forward launch. The disadvantages of a reverse inflation are that it is initially more complicated to learn. It is difficult to perform if you do not have sure footing, and it is more difficult than a forward inflation in calm conditions on very shallow slopes. When the winds are blowing strong enough to inflate the glider without forward movement, you can practice kiting. Kiting is a great way to practice canopy inflation, control, and deflation, and is a mandatory skill for the advancing pilot. Like all forms of aviation, most paragliding accidents occur during launch and landing. A safe paraglider pilot must be comfortable inflating, launching, and collapsing the canopy in the conditions he wants to fly in. Nothing better prepares you for handling myriad conditions than kiting practice with a variety of slopes and winds. You should practice kiting not just in the reverse position, but also in the forward position after turning around from a reverse inflation. If the winds are blowing stronger than 5 miles per hour on a slope, you can kite the canopy while standing still, and a reverse inflation is recommended. A reverse inflation is also recommended in lighter winds on slopes that provide for sure footing and have adequate room for the inflation, turnaround, and launch. There have been a lot of different techniques developed for reverse inflation over the years, but we are going to recommend and explain 3 techniques, 2 for calm or light winds and 1 for stronger winds. The key to each of these techniques is that the pilot starts with the correct brake handles in the correct hands, and therefore does not have to let go of the brakes and grab them again when turning to face forward. The variations in technique involve how the pilot holds the risers during layout and initial inflation. Initially, you may find it best to learn a single technique for calm or light winds. Then, once you are comfortable with it, you should learn the other variation. The following assumes you are a right-handed pilot and will be turning to your left to face forward. If you are a left-handed pilot and/or will be spinning to your right, the hand positions as well as which riser crosses over the other riser should be reversed. This variation is normally the easiest to initially learn and works well in calm or light winds. You make the initial pull for inflation with your arms parallel and straight out in front of your shoulders, with each hand holding the opposite A riser. Once you pull the wing up and it approaches overhead, you release the A risers and use the respective brake handles for control. The disadvantage of this technique is that it is difficult to make an immediate correction for a low wing because you cannot pull the A risers of the low wing while pulling the brake handle of the high wing with the same hand. This is usually not that significant unless you are inflating in a tight spot with a crosswind. Face the canopy squarely and back up until the A-lines are tight. With straight arms, lean back and pull evenly on the A risers to inflate the canopy and bring it off the ground. As the canopy comes up, release the A risers and be prepared to use brakes to stop the canopy from flying overhead. If the canopy starts to move off center, Step laterally towards the canopy while pulling the brake handle that is in your hand on that same side. For example, if the canopy moves towards your right, canopy's left, you will need to step towards your right and apply brake on the canopy's right side, the handle which is in your right hand. Steady kiting of the canopy requires greater than 5 miles per hour of wind. So if nature is not providing it, you must make up the difference by forward movement into the wind. This means that initially you will continue walking backwards as quickly as required to keep the canopy overhead. Continuous backward walking is difficult, and you should practice turning around to face the intended launch direction as soon as the canopy is overhead. Keeping the canopy inflated in such conditions requires a continuous tow force on the canopy during your turnaround and is greatly aided if you are moving downhill on a slope because your weight will help keep the canopy loaded and inflated. A small and smooth brake application is normally required to keep the canopy inflated during the turnaround to the forward kiting position. If there is any wind at all, you may want to get in the practice of spinning back around to face the canopy prior to deflating it. It is a good practice to spin back around to deflate the canopy in the opposite direction that you turn around to launch in. That way the risers will be in the proper configuration for a subsequent inflation. In winds above 5 miles per hour, you can kite the canopy while standing still. You should always have your brake handles in the respective hands prior to inflating for flight. However, it is perfectly acceptable to practice kiting with the brake handles still in their retaining clips. In this variation, you inflate with the right wing A risers in your right hand and the left A risers in your left hand. The advantage is that you can release one riser before the other if you need to apply corrective brake for directional control before the canopy is high enough to release both A risers. This can be especially advantageous when inflating in a tight spot in a crosswind. The disadvantage is you start the inflation with your arms crossed, which can be more difficult to learn. Disconnect the brake handles and grasp them in their respective hands. Keep your right hand under the risers, reach all the way under and to the left to grasp the right wing A risers just below the quick links in your right hand. With your left hand over the risers, reach to the right and grasp the left wing A risers just below the quick links. Put your hands together at the wrists, facing each other and with your left hand on top. Inflation is the same as in the first variation. However, if the canopy starts to move off center, step laterally towards the canopy while pulling the brake handle that is in your hand on that same side. As the winds increase in strength and/or the launch slope becomes steeper, the possibility increases for either getting dragged downwind during the inflation or pulled off your feet prematurely, either event being potentially dangerous. You can control the canopy best in these situations by using a launch technique that begins with the correct brake lines in each hand and one hand controlling the initiation of inflation with the A risers and the other hand controlling the rate of inflation with the C risers. We will refer to this launch technique as Variation 3. In winds of more than 10 miles per hour or in gusty winds, you may be pulled off the ground before you are ready to fly. Use extreme caution in these conditions. Do not attempt to launch in high or gusty winds until you have mastered kiting the canopy in these conditions. To avoid losing control of the canopy in moderate or stronger winds, you should not spread it out into a horseshoe shape, but instead keep it in a rosette, which is a loosely shaped ball, oriented so that the center section is uphill and facing the wind. Pull the tips out several feet so that the wind will be able to inflate the center section. Gently pull the risers as you walk away from the canopy, freeing the lines. Sort the risers and lines as best you can, ensuring the A risers and lines are on top and the brake lines are on the bottom. You should not open the wing fully to verify that all the lines are free of snags until later, after you have hooked the risers to your harness and you are better able to control the canopy. Hook the risers to the canopy in the reverse position described previously. Facing the canopy, detach the brake handles with the respective hands. Grasp all A risers in your left hand and both C risers in your right. Each set of risers should be aligned at the quick links, and you should hold them just below the quick links. Back away from the canopy until the A lines go tight, and then, by pulling on the A risers, tease the leading edge of the canopy up into the wind to start it inflating. Do not raise the canopy fully off the ground. Just bring the leading edge up 3 to 5 feet and fill the cells to make the canopy spread out span-wise. If the canopy starts to fly off the ground, release pressure on the A risers while stepping towards the canopy and, if necessary, pull on the C risers to bring the canopy back down. In higher winds, you should only use the inner A risers for the inflation. As the canopy builds into a wall, you will be able to fully verify that the risers and lines are correctly routed and free of snags. If you discover this is not the case, then collapse the wing, bundle it back into a loose rosette as required, and fix the problem. When ready, tug lightly on the A risers to start the inflation. As the canopy comes up, it will pull hard against you. Moderate the rate at which the canopy comes up and the canopy's pull on you by using pressure on the C risers and stepping quickly towards the canopy as necessary. As the winds increase in strength, you need to get the canopy off the ground and overhead quickly. Any hesitation while the canopy is in the high drag region may result in pulling you off of your feet. By the same token, failure to check the canopy as it moves rapidly overhead may result in you being lifted off your feet momentarily with the canopy overshooting into a forward tuck. Use caution as you progress to stronger winds, and do not attempt kiting on slopes until you have demonstrated proficiency on a large, unrestricted grassy field. Regardless of whether you are reverse or forward kiting, maintain a strong lean away from the canopy and an exaggerated knee bend. Always be ready for small gusts that may momentarily lift you off the ground. If you get spun around, lean forward aggressively to keep as much weight as far forward as possible. If you ever start to lose control of your position, quickly reach up and pull both C risers fully while spinning to face the canopy and running towards it. Sooner or later, while you're trying to inflate or control the canopy on the ground, it's going to come down with a partial twist, with one wingtip flying over the top of the canopy and coming to rest upside down. Simply pull on the brake line on the side of the canopy, which is nose first. This will inflate the canopy from the trailing edge just on that side. The wingtip will fly up and back over to its normal position.